So hello and welcome to Limitless You Talk with me, Katie, and I'm delighted to be joined by fellow funeral director, fellow next generation funeral director like me, who is second generation, first generation being parents. And I've got to know Sam recently in person. I've stalked him for quite a little while on LinkedIn, social media, and on TikTok, where you can find him at Talk Death with Sam. And we're going to get into all of that. But first of all, Sam, to kind of paint the picture, set the scene in the context, who is Sam both as a funeral director, but just as Sam?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me, Katie. Thank you for having me on. Like you said, that we sort of bumped into each other at the last Safe Charter event, which was really great. Who is Sam? Um, Sam Sam is a funeral director that has been sort of born and bred into the profession. I've grown up in and around the industry for my whole life, albeit after sort of, I went to school, did sort of my qualifications, A levels, went to university, and I never sort of had that initial intention of going into the industry. So, what happened with me is that I went into sort of a graduate role elsewhere in something completely unrelated. And then, that role was going to progress into something a little bit more. But then obviously COVID and the pandemic hit. And then I sort of made a decision then as to, you know, give it a go. And, it was only ever going to be for like maybe a 12-month period and to see how it would go, in a sense that whether it would be for me. And 3 years on down the line, we're at the back of the pandemic and COVID, and I'm still here, and I'm still enjoying it. And that's the main thing. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's who I am. Outside of work as well, I do switch off, like we all do. I think it's really important to have that, sort of work life balance, particularly in the industry that we do work in. Albeit, I think, I've been pretty hard on myself over the last 12 months. So I've been studying for my DIP qualification. I've been doing this, that, and the other, and it's solely just been business, and work and learning. And I think for me, that's sort of taken a toll. And I've not sort of looked after myself. I've kind of got into this rut where, you know, I've been putting my heart and soul into the business because that's what you do. That's what we do. We're a family business, and it's starting to take its toll. And I think I have now achieved my DIP qualification, which is great. But I think now it's time to start giving a little bit of time back to me, and I would probably benefit from that. I'm looking into the new year, and you see January on the horizon, and you say new year, new me, and really, I think in the new year, hopefully, and I mean, I could start now, but it's not the new year, so there will be sort of changes, and I will sort of see it more of a balance back into my own life.
Love that. And for anyone listening, the FD, I always get so tongue twisted when I say that, is the diploma in funeral directing. It's one of the many ones of the industry that it's such a great insight to the industry, many different levels. And yeah, I've not done the course, but from being involved in different courses and looking into things through the years, yeah, it's not just it's very intense, I'll say that. But I think, I love how you said, you thought you'll go in for 12 months and see how it works. And all I could think was, well, I went in for 2 days to help, and that was 10 and a half years ago.
Yeah.
So there's a similar pattern here.
Yeah.
And then, you like it, you want to develop with you and within it, because it is a family business that, you do get engrossed in it.
Yeah.
It consumes you for a period of time. And I think if I could give you any advice just firsthand while it's present in my mind is, yeah, don't think of it as new year, new me. Just think of it as, in order for you to be who you need to be,
Mm.
as the qualified funeral director that you are, and also be Sam, and to care for the many families you do, you have to look after yourself, because we are the
Yeah.
caring profession. But
Yeah.
if we don't care for ourselves, how good can we be caring? And that's what I wanted to come in and start with that, because we'd spoken about it, and I really found, like, there's not a lot of second generation family members like us. There's not a lot that we're in. The industry now is into fifth, sixth generations now, and I find that incredible. And everybody asks me, and has asked me for 28 years now, like, what is it like being surrounded by the industry as a child, as a teenager, as an adult, and then working in it? So I was like, I'm going to ask Sam that. Like,
Yeah.
what is it like for you throughout your life? It's been a
Yeah.
part of your life. What is it like living with the funeral industry as that big
Yeah.
cloud?
I, th- I mean, I think for me and you, it's normal. And from a young age, I grew up, you know, living next door to the business. So where our premises is, it's like an old sort of farmhouse, and the business is like a converted barn. And we've grown up in the sort of the farmhouse to the barn. So, as I've grown up, I've seen a hearse, I've seen a limousine, I've seen a coffin in a hearse. And for me, that's just been normal. And then I'll go back to sort of, your school age and your primary school and things. And, when you're bringing mates back and things, and they're seeing stuff, and then they're starting to ask questions. And it's like, oh, well, what do your parents do for a job? Or the funeral directors, and the initial sort of reaction you get is like a squinted face. And even when you're on holiday, and I get it now, and you bump into people and it comes out with what do you do for work? Oh, I'm a funeral director. And it's like, oh, but then people are inquisitive, so there are so many
Mm,
questions, and this will probably lead on to another one of the questions, that people are so inquisitive about our profession and what we do and what happens behind closed doors, because people don't know. And I'm a real advocate for telling people, because why, when somebody has passed away, should then it be hidden? It shouldn't. It should be just a normal, like, process in life, that you have that understanding as to what happens. And I know that you guys up in Scotland have gone through sort of regulation, and you guys are like gearing up for that. And I think down in England and Wales that, eventually it will happen, and people will have more of an understanding of what happens in a funeral home, because at the moment, I don't think people do.
no,
They don't.
they
And
don't have a clue what we do. And see, I was laughing to myself there, and I was like, do you see when you're on holiday and you could be talking, I don't know, to a group of people from another part of the world, and when you say, "Oh, I'm Sam, I'm a funeral director," I love the kind of, as if
yeah,
like it's
that's
it's
it.
almost like a delayed
Yeah.
reaction of, you're a
Sorry,
what?
sorry, you're a what? Yeah,
You're a
yeah,
what? I,
yeah,
I just I find that I don't get a buzz out of it. That's not what I mean by that.
yeah,
But there's something, because they're not expecting you to say that. And then they do
yeah,
become inquisitive. I mean, they
yeah,
ask the most silly questions that you think, well, you've seen that on the telly, you've seen that on a film, you've
yeah,
seen that on what NCIS America. That's not actually what happens. So there's a
yeah.
difference between what our reality is and then what
Mm,
Tom, Dick, or Harry is actually asking
yeah,
us. But I think it's right. I think that the more it becomes normal, and as you say, like, coming on to that, that's why you created TikTok. I remember asking you, we were at Manchester at Safe Age, and I was like, why did you do it? Because I was so interested of, you know, you were saying all this stuff, and it obviously related to me. I understand that I work in the industry and have done. It's been a part of all my life, so I get it. I know it. But
yeah.
for anyone listening, like, Talk Death with Sam, that's your TikTok. Why? Give me, and I know why, but tell everybody else why.
Yeah. So, I mean, TikTok is so popular now, and a lot of there's a generation now that will spend hours and hours scrolling through TikTok, looking at different, content creators and things like that. And a lot of sort of news stories are broken on TikTok now. So people are going to TikTok to learn. And the idea of what I sort of set up to do earlier this year was to create little educational pieces, whether they were 30 to 90 seconds long, for people just to learn about what we do and the processes involved, which kind of answers the question in regards to people not knowing. So it's that awareness piece and making those people aware as to, you know, what to do and how to arrange a funeral to begin with, because people don't know what to do. So it might be a sudden death and people won't have the idea as to contact initially. And, you know, my idea is that if there's people that learn the process, that the bereavement process themselves will be somewhat easier because they know what they're doing. And you know, that's something that, you know, I'm quite passionate about, really.
I think that sums it up really well. I think it's so easy. Again, I come from the time where you couldn't talk, and I said this to you before, like you couldn't talk about it. I couldn't talk about mental health before.
Yeah.
And when I've pestered the living daylights out of numerous funeral directors in all parts of the country and been very, very fortunate to share conversations, to share talks, different things within the industry itself about it, you know, that's the side that, you know, we shouldn't be on here having this conversation and raising the awareness of there's not enough talk for us. But yet at the
Yeah.
same time, there's no representation of actually, as a funeral director or as a member of this industry, we don't get looked after. We are expected to go on with it. And it's up to us, as you say, we are that generation of social media. Like, it sort of is left to us that we
Mm.
have to do something about it. And like, what kind of feedback and things have you had with that, with it so far?
Great. So, you know, we have sort of a following on Facebook, and you know, I am posting the videos on Facebook as well. And, you know, from friends, family, clients and things, the feedback is really, really good. And, you know, I've kind of taken I did initially do, you know, create quite a bit of content earlier this year, but kind of study kind of took over. So, you know, I'm hoping soon that I can, you know, start to produce more and more and get the message out there that people want to hear. Because like you say, that it's the well-being of the families that we look after, for ourselves as well as funeral directors. It's just a different slant on tradition.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. It's a different slant on tradition. I think we've been so caught up with, you know, a traditional black funeral, where there's a hearse, there's a coffin, there's possibly a limousine. That now there's sort of a generation coming through that wants something completely different. And, you know, that to me and you at the moment, I don't know what that is, but hopefully that we'll find that out. And I think slowly, people's perceptions on funerals, I think, are changing rapidly day by day.
Mm.
You know, from each different family, they'll want a different sort of element that's different to the other. And I think that's obviously, you know, down to being able to see things. So posting things on Facebook and then influencing, or TikTok, influencing people to ask for different things. So I think generally, if there's more people doing it in our industry, the more people are going to see, right, you know, we can have this. We can have a bespoke coffin. We can have a colourful coffin with a football team, you know, posted on it. We can have something, you know, a little bit different, a different method of, you know, transport to the crematorium, whether it's a VW camper van. If people see it, they will probably ask for it. And
Yeah.
that is my sort of point of view. So, you know, it's coming back to that educational piece as again to educate people. And that's what it is. That's entirely what it is.
Education, that big word. And see, if you think back, I'm just thinking of like, because I can relate to you in a lot of ways. So I think my first question thinking here would be, was there any point of you growing up or anything that not made you resent the industry, but if other people expected you or assumed that you would just automatically go into the family business, make you sort of resent that was you were automatically associated with it?
Yeah, so Katie, I'm sure you're exactly the same as me. So being second gen, you sort of have that expectation that
Massive.
you have to go into the business because you've seen your parents set this business up from nothing. My mum and dad were 24, and I look back at, well, I think of myself as a 24-year-old. So mum and dad were 24. They set up business. Dad had a career in the co-op, and then decided to go on his own. And they struggled to begin with. They really
My mum
really
and dad are the
struggled, and
same. Yep.
and they struggled to get business. And then I've obviously been brought into the world and watched them grow this business to what it is today in our town. And I've put pressure on myself. So I'll be open and honest that throughout my life, particularly more towards when I was in secondary school, I went to university. You're then putting this pressure on yourself, thinking, right, mum and dad have grown this successful business. What am I going to do? What am I going to do, and how am I going to sort of better that? So that was like that was a tough time for me personally, with sort of my own mental health, and I struggled a bit after university because I'd made the decision that I was going to try and do something else after university, um, and that did work out. It was a great job, and then sort of things happen for a reason, and it's that cliche sort of term. But they did, and I came into the business 3 years ago with the idea that I would learn from the bottom. So I was polishing cars, washing cars, doing mortuary work, fitting the coffins and things. So I know the business inside out from the jobs that our funeral operatives do, to what a funeral arranger and a funeral director does. So I know the business inside and out. But coming back to sort of your initial question, the expectation, yeah, huge. The pressure that you put on yourself as a second generation, is massive. Is really really massive. But was that necessary at the time? Probably not. But
We didn't know
look,
any different. That's
no,
what I
that's true.
always say. Like we didn't know any different. For me, I'm an only child. And I know you've got your brother. Is
I've
that
got a
right?
brother, yeah.
You've got a brother. So and this is not me to sound, but I was there. There was nobody else to take that pressure off me, or that expectation. And the expectation came with, people that wanted to be my friend for what I say was completely the wrong reasons, and I know that now. So I was always determined that I would never go into the business. I was the same as you, but then it happened for a reason. I'm doing the longest 2-day job that anyone will ever do 10.5 years later. But I'm the same as you, like everything happened for a reason. And the pressure that I put on myself when I went into the business learning, I went in and it was just, Katie, you're only answering the phones. That was it. By the lunchtime of the first day, that was just not happening. Everything else. But I didn't see my first deceased until I was 19. And it wasn't because I was scared or anything. I liked how you said that, like, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
I was so busy learning everything else, and I'd just been to college to study business because I just wanted to get out of school. And because I'd been around business, I had an interest more in a business sense of, I was curious about how this worked, how that worked. So
Yeah.
that was the side I learned a lot about. But then when I did learn about a deceased, I seen what a deceased looked like, seen a coffin, seen a deceased inside of a coffin, caring of a deceased, all of the things that account to what we do as members of the funeral industry, that I found that pressure that I put on myself suddenly disappeared. There was no pressure at that point. And I loved it. And for me, that when you said everything happens for a reason, there was something that clicked there for that. Like, I just feel that all the pressure or any expectation just left because I was, like, it felt right at that time. I don't know if you went through that at the same time.
I think so, yeah. And you then obviously being in the business for the last 3 years, you then realise why you were putting yourself through that, pressure initially. Because it is the best. And I know I'm a funeral director, but it is the best job in the world. It really is. You get so much out of it. It's always such an honour to be let into another family's life to look after their loved one, and that is
Yeah.
the greatest honour that anybody could ever have. For me, and that's just what I've taken away from this last 3 years, because I've been more involved in the business as, let's say, a professional rather than an onlooker who was, a member of the family watching on. I've just been more obviously hands on, and I've learnt the role. I know the role inside out now, and I know that it is for me. I know that. So yeah,
And I think as well, like, there'll be a lot of people saying, "Oh, you two are got it easy," and things like, "Yeah, okay, we might have it easy." I wish we did. Trust me, I wish I lived in a perfect world that me and Sam have had it easy. But when you're working with family, when your family do have that kind of higher expectation because they know you all
yeah,
too well, like, I just want to say to anyone listening to this conversation, believe me, it's not.
no,
We have to work the hardest. We've not only got an expectation. There always will be an expectation, but we've also got a reputation that precedes us
yeah,
because we are the product of our parents at the end of the
yeah,
at the
yeah,
end of the day. I remember my first funeral, and it was one of my first funerals that actually I went out with my dad, and it was in a church, and we were trolleying a coffin down. The family decided not to carry, so, and I was walking down that aisle and I was like, I'm actually out conducting a funeral with my dad, who wasn't keen on a woman funeral director, was trying to protect me, and he was trying to be the dad and at the same time, but that fight and everything, and I'm getting to conduct a funeral and I'm getting to do it with my dad. Like, I'm actually
mm,
getting to do it, and everyone in attendance to the celebration of this person's life is getting the privilege of two generations.
yeah,
It's showing what the present is, but potentially what the future is at that time, and that was like an extra incentive, and it was like, okay, but this is where my own reputation comes from at that point, and
yeah,
people don't realize, like, this side of it either. That's why I was really, really keen to have this conversation, because we do work really hard, and it is a lifestyle. As much as we like, I'm humbled that every family that I've got to deal with over the years, I feel as if I walk away from an arrangement, from spending time with the family the day of the funeral, that there's something I've learned from not
yeah,
only the deceased that I've actually possibly never spoken to prior to death, but through their family. I've maybe learned something about what they did, or I learned a quote or a word that they said that it's quite motivational, it's quite inspirational, it's quite momentum building. And I will
yeah,
remember my own coach has said to me in the past that, and he was like, some funerals I've been at, he's like, I walk away from them, and he was like, it gives me some sort of momentum to make sure that the life I'm living and the things that he wants to do, and he's like, going to do it. And I'm
yeah,
like, do you know, actually, that is the way that we should all treat. Yes, okay, there's some funerals I walked away from, and people are like that. I don't know who they were talking about. That's not my Uncle John they were talking about. Or,
mm,
and I'm like, look, you're not going to stand at a funeral and call them bad names. But it's a fascinating one as well, and it is an honour and a privilege to help everyone that comes through our door. And I think I wrote down about what the future is. And the reason why is because I've been asked about it. I get asked constantly, when's your dad retiring? I've had people call us up looking for sponsorship, or, and there's, the usual curiosity or nosiness is in my part of Scotland is that they're already saying he is retired because somebody started a rumour. So for you, and this is just because you do think about it. We're around death every day. We can't not think about the future. What do you feel like the future potentially holds for you? Like, now you've done this industry for 3 years, does it give you kind of aspiration, growth?
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I'm my sort of ambition was to become qualified. So, I'm a qualified DIP FD from the NAFD now, which for me is great, and that could take me anywhere. In terms of future succession, it is something that we have talked about, and we probably should talk about a little bit more,
Mhm.
because I think that we are in an industry where it's important to have that plan in place. Um, I get asked constantly on funerals now when I'm obviously conducting as FD. Has your dad retired? Has he retired? Where
Yeah,
is he? Where
yeah.
is he?
Is he on the
And
golf course? Is he on holidays? Is he on
yeah,
the
yeah.
golf course? Yeah,
And
where is he? Yeah.
and that's the question I get. And and I just say no, not yet. He's still very much involved, and will be for a little while. Um, but no, there's no sort of plan in place. But then that's coming back to me and what I see the future to be, in regards to where the business goes in the future. And I think and we'll come back to sort of where we started. The industry is changing rapidly, really, really rapidly,
Mm.
and we're having to adapt to that. I can see direct cremation. So direct cremations are becoming sort of more popular. That being sort of a more popular option for families. I think there'll always be a traditional element in there,
Yeah.
i.e., hearse, limousine, church service, ceremony of some sort. But I think that as well, we've also got balance of this new alternative sort of element coming through. So I see sort of an alternate element being why should a funeral be so regimented in regards to it must be at a church, it must be at a crematorium, that why not have, let's say, a venue where a celebration of life can take place, where you can have family, friends gather, you can play music, you can display videos, photos and things, and why not even have the refreshments there at the same time?
Mhm.
I think as a sort of a culture and as a society in the UK, we seem to be getting it so wrong. And I think there are other methods that we can look at of saying our final goodbyes. And this is coming from, a funeral director in traditional black attire, and and offers a traditional funeral. But if we don't wake up to the fact of different offerings now, we never will, and we'll stay in our sort of old ways, as to I've
Yeah.
found in my research.
Yeah.
So that is sort of what I see sort of happening in the future. Why have a service that you can have at different venues and you can hold it all in one place? I don't know. We'll see. So there are plans there
Do you
for
think
for
we'll
that type
go?
of service.
Do you think we'll go into sort of like the American territory? Because that fascinates the living daylights out of me.
Yeah, I mean the Americans are crazy to begin with because they've just voted Trump back in. So
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, yeah. How do we comment on that? But for me, like watching the programs through the years, and yes, I do sometimes go on TikTok, for example, and type in funerals, and the amount of content that there is about. Now, please bear in mind, anyone listening to this conversation, please don't believe everything that you see. I am the first person that sees something on TV or on a film and is so critical of the way that they're doing it because I'm like, that's wrong. That's not how we do it. But the way the Americans do it, like, for example, I've seen where the deceased has been embalmed and they've been put on a motorbike because it was a favourite motorbike. They do now. If you're a person that goes to McDonald's, goes through a drive-through to get your cheeseburger or your Happy Meal, it does exist that we have exactly the same thing in the funeral industry in America where you can do that to see your loved one. That does exist. I'm not making that up. And I always think,
I
is
didn't
that,
actually know. I didn't know
did you
that.
not
So
know that? Yeah,
no.
that does exist. They call it a drive-by. not only in America will you get this, but there's all different variations that you can do. There was a program on about it on Channel 5 well before COVID. And it was a funeral director from SAFE, the Society Allied of Independent Funeral Directors. He did it in conjunction with someone else that went to visit places in America and things. And I always think, are we going to go that way? Everything else in life has sort of become Americanized. I believe that funerals potentially could become and I'm like you, like I think there'll be a time where you go to a venue, everything's done all at once. Like I have this vision that, you can, like you rent out a big hall for a wedding or something. The two things are like that. They are the same, although completely different aspects of life. But I believe that they'll become like that.
Yeah,
totally believe it.
I think culturally we're a lot different to Americans in that sense, and I think they're more
We're not
sort
as
of
crazy.
no. I think we're a lot more reserved, and they're sort of not. So I think that's sort of a difference. But I do think that I think you only have to go over the Irish Sea and go to Ireland and see how funerals take place over in Ireland that are a lot more sort of family orientated, and a lot more happens and takes place at the funeral home. And there might be an open coffin, open casket, which doesn't have to be the case, and they'll hold let's say an afternoon or an evening where family can gather, share stories, share memories and things like that. And I think why are we getting it so wrong over in England, Wales, and Scotland, when they're doing it so right over in Ireland? And I just think that is probably a cultural shift that I think we're nearly there and we're going through it, but we just need to start offering it. So as long as we can, start to offer it, more and more people will then think, oh yeah, this is what I want. This is sort of what I want to happen after I've, sort of passed away. But we don't have it. And it's about coming back to the education. It's about educating, and we can do that as funeral directors, educating people on what can be done. Because I don't think people have that understanding, and they think it must be a funeral service, and that's it. So no, that's my sort of point of view.
Yeah. Does it make you then think, like talking about education, does it make you think about your own funeral? I know it's such a morbid topic and a morbid thing, but does it make you think about?
Yeah, and I've maybe not so much me, but I've thought about my parents, and I know that sounds a little bit morbid, but
you've
you,
answered you've answered it the way I was hoping. Maybe
yeah,
not actually on the conversation, but honestly,
yeah,
I am exactly the same. Yeah.
So there's a generation, our generation, that mums and dads that are 50, 60 years old, middle age, and eventually we would have to arrange, some sort of ceremony or farewell of some sort. And I look at how that might take place for my parents. And, you know, I think that people want to celebrate. People want to celebrate somebody's life. They want to have a few drinks. They want to have something to eat. Why not have a venue where you can do all that in one place? And then we're coming back to the direct cremation element. You don't, and this is educating people. When you go to a crematorium, the cremation doesn't always take place immediately after the service. Sometimes, if not the day after.
Yeah.
People don't have that knowledge. So for me, that have the ceremony elsewhere, have your celebratory event, enjoy those times and the memories that you make, and then have a direct cremation afterwards. So have the funeral director take you for a direct cremation afterwards, and then you don't have to be present for that formality of a committal service that we're so familiar of, with the curtains closing.
Yeah.
Like I say, it's just another a slant on it, and it's just something that I'm starting to think of as to how it will look in 10, 15 years, 20 years time. And that's just, something I've started to think about.
I think it's natural for us to think about, because we spend so long when we're on, as I always say, we're on the other side of the desk and we're guiding a family. But at one point or another, we're the ones that become the present generation, and we have to sit on the other side of that table. And it does make you think, you want to get it right. You've seen so many other people get it right. Is the pressure on for you to get it right? It's all of these crazy. It's natural thinking that. And I think your point with the crematorium as well is like, when a deceased goes to the crematorium, the cremation process, they call it what they call charged into the cremator. But a deceased does not leave the care of the coffin. There's so many people that say, "Oh, what happens to the coffin when you go to the coffin and the deceased stay together? They stay together." And that's it's this part of education. I think that we're sending out this message here right now, and through this conversation is like, please listen to what we're saying, because we're trying to raise some awareness. We're trying to create that education that, we are sitting here in our 20s. Many of you are listening to us sitting here in your 20s. We are going to be that generation one day that it's part of, the older generation now, I call them around here the professional funeral goers, just because they know so many people and they're at so many funerals, and that's where you see people. Like, it is, you need to be educated now. It needs to be normalised, and it needs the likes of us who are willing to put ourselves out there and talk about it and raise that awareness and try and make it less of a taboo topic and everything. And we're doing it for the benefit of the families that we know one day we will have to represent. Obviously, we don't want to do that for a very, very long time. But reality is, it's always going to be there, and it's always going to be needed.
Yeah. What's your point of view, Katie, in regards to what a funeral will potentially look like in 20, 30 years' time? I know it's a tough one.
See, for me, I could split that into two. I think my first one would be that it will be direct cremation will be the first choice, because a lot of people will want to do what you said in terms of have a venue and everything and do that separate. And I think that is the way that it will go.
Yeah.
And make it more of that celebration that I reckon everybody deserves. I think the second way is, I am very much fascinated with this growth in America at the moment that they're trying to bring into the UK with water cremation. And I know that's something you've touched on, and I've read. And I like the idea of it. I like the idea that it's a natural process. I like the idea, and I'm not going to go into exactly what water cremation is, because I don't want to scare anyone out, but it's another form of, being cremated without being burnt, to put it bluntly, because that's what everybody seems to associate it with.
Yeah.
It's the use of a recycled water alkali. It's a similar process, but it's a much calmer process on the body. You still get ashes back. It goes through a slightly different process, I just feel like a lot of people now that have gained spiritual awareness, or they may be religious, or whatever they are, I think there could be a rise for that. And do you know what it would do? It would only take, say, one celebrity or somebody more well known to do it, then the rest of us would jump on the bandwagon. And I think that's the way to go. I definitely think funerals and churches will not be as regular. I always think about it for me, because I do think about if something were happening to me tomorrow. I always think about it kind of a couple of ways. Like, if something happened to me tomorrow, would I be happy to die? And I'd be like, well, not at the moment, because I've not ticked off all the boxes that I want to tick off. But have the boxes that I've ticked off so far, would I be okay about it? I wouldn't feel great about it, obviously, but could I handle that? And I'd be like, well, yeah, I possibly could, but there's a lot more damage to be done yet. And then at the same time, it's like, I wouldn't want a funeral. I think I've sat at so I was actually looking at this. In my 10 years, I have been a part of over 3,000 funerals in 10 years. And since I was born, I've been a part of over 700 funerals in my lifetime. And that's just from my mum and dad's business. That's just from our business. And I'm like, I don't want a funeral. Like, that's 11,000 funerals. That is a hell of a lot. I don't want a funeral. I want the party. I want the food. I
Yeah.
want that celebration of, like, in terms of, I want everyone else to get the benefit out of me dying.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, I
Yeah.
love pizza. I like, the silly things. I would, like, like everyone to, like, I love football. I'm a Kilmarnock football fan. I have been since been 4 years old. I would want them to rent out the stadium and rent out the hotel next door and get hospitality,
Yeah.
be allowed to go out in the pitch, and if there's guys or whatever, go and play a five-a-side, or,
Yeah.
like, go and do that. Don't waste your money coming to some venue. I'm not a religious person.
Mm.
I'm not anything. And go and do something. Go and give the money to help someone else. Like, mental health is important to me. Go and give the money to, like, don't, have a
Yeah.
little bit for what's needed in you. That's the kind of way that I think about it.
Yeah.
And I do think that once this generation, that's the kind of older generation just now, I think as there's less and less of that generation, and the more people don't want tradition,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, it is. But then on the other side of the perspective is that as funeral directors in a family business, then that then puts us at a vulnerable position in regards to, offering our traditional funeral
Yeah,
services. So if there's more people opting for an alternate, I think sort of our role as funeral directors will evolve into sort of, let's say, event sort of planners. So, and I know that we,
what do you call it? It's a it's a backwards wedding planner, because we're not a wedding.
yeah, yeah,
Like, it is,
yeah,
and we're not we're not seeing anything that's like,
yeah,
we're just like that
yeah,
is what it is. That you're planning an event.
yeah. And I think for the alternate sort of element is that we'll still be responsible to look after the people, so the deceased.
Yeah.
We'll still have the facilities to do that. We'll provide the coffin, and then logistically, we would be involved in moving the person to and from a venue, or if it's taking place internally, to the crematorium, and arranging for the celebratory element
Mm-hmm.
that's created. So, that's what I see. That is what I see happening, and our sort of profession of evolving. I think it already is, and it's starting to. But it's somebody jumping first and going, like you said about a
Yeah.
celebrity going with a water cremation. It's having that awareness of, all right, this is it. We can do this.
Mm-hmm.
People
Yep.
people need to have that awareness, and that's what it's about.
So, like, for direct cremation, it was David Bowie. David
Yeah,
Bowie had the direct cremation. So I mean, for me, he was like, wow, if someone like David Bowie, who had probably had a lot of money in the world, that could have had such a traditional funeral, could have the best coffin that the world has ever seen, like no expense spared and things like that. He didn't. He didn't have that. And I'm like, because he didn't have that, he was one of the first. So he started this trend. So this trend has just like, so we're now seeing it on television, we're seeing it on radio, we're listening to it on radio. We're getting asked questions about it. Oh, Sam, I want a funeral plan, but I just want cheap. I just want taken straight to crematorium, burnt. Like, that's the way people come in and say it now, because that's what they want. They want to copy the trend. And it doesn't,
yeah,
it's like the latest pair of jeans or the latest phone back in the day. Because everybody else had it, you have to have it. It does actually exist when it comes to funerals. The amount of people that ask us, oh, we must get a car because you've got to follow the hearse in a limousine. Well, actually, there's a lot more people now that don't do that, because they take their own cars, or they're going for a private meal with family, or
yeah,
I've had the families go and have karaoke somewhere. You know what I mean? There's no end of stories that we could say and things, but it's the tradition is going, and it's evolving in the right ways that I think it needs to, because the world is changing. And
yeah,
we've been one of the last industries to change, albeit, but it was never going to not change.
yeah,
It was never going to not
yeah,
change. We're just maybe a bit on the slower side. A bit
yeah,
on the slower side of it. But I think I've asked everybody that's come on my podcast so far, like, what's your superpower? But I'm going to change that question for you, because I'm going to change it to, What is your superpower in the funeral industry? That's a new one. Even I'm thinking about that now. But like, what is Sam, the funeral director in the funeral industry's superpower? If you had one, if you've got one.
Oof. I think it's having the ability to change perception. So changing perception of what a sort of a traditional funeral has been for centuries and centuries and centuries
Mm-hmm.
into what a funeral should and would look like in the future. I think that is, it's not a superpower, but it's me having the ability to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think slowly I'm attempting to. I think it'll start to pick up in pace. We have plans to change things internally within our business to offer things in-house, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, rather than at the crematorium. And I think once we have the ability to do that, I think then I'll start to sort of bang the drum more and let people know, look, you can have your funeral service here if you want a funeral service, if you want a celebration of life, if you want your refreshments here afterwards with the coffin, you can. You can have a couple of drinks in there as well. It's just a twist on it. It's a complete twist. And I think when people experience that, they'll want it. They will
Yeah.
100% want it.
Yeah.
The formality of a funeral service that me and you know will eventually be phased out.
Yeah.
And
It's boring, and I don't mean that. It's just boring.
no,
It's a boring tradition that
yeah,
it's expected of, but
it
it's
is.
not the way of the world now. It's
It
not.
is. It is expected of, and don't get me wrong. And some other funeral directors will probably listen to this podcast. I'm not trying to, you know, let's say, put them out of business in the sense that that's what their traditional values look like.
Yeah.
This is just the idea of wake up. We're in the 21st century. Um, you know, I will offer a traditional funeral service if somebody asks for it. I'm able to do that. But I think there's also an element coming in now that we can look at something alternate. And I think what we've chatted about maybe is that offering. So we'll
Yeah.
see.
I think we're going to leave a lot of people a lot of food for thought, and I think we've spread a really interesting message that I think could be the first of many, to be honest. Because at
Yeah,
the moment we're only one of two of us at the moment in
yeah,
the country, in the UK. I know of one other that is trying to raise awareness of things, and that three of us out of a lot of funeral industry
yeah.
individuals is sad at the moment. But that's definitely going to change, and I think we've spread an amazing message, and I'm very, very grateful that I got to meet you in person not so long ago now. And we've connected back and forth, and that's what it's all about. That's how we network in such a
Yeah.
crazy world of what we do. But Sam, thank you so much
Thank you.
for this amazing conversation. Knowing that we are in the right direction of a second generation and what we are doing, and I think the main thing out of all of this is for the families that we humbly and honoured get to work with, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So Sam, thank you very much. For anyone that wants to follow Sam on TikTok to learn all about it, get educated, it's Talk Death with Sam. And on Facebook, where will anyone find you?
On Facebook, our family business, Gallagher Family Funeral Directors in
And
Keighley, West Yorkshire.
you will definitely see Sam's face plastered all over it, because I probably looked like a stalker when I was saying, "Oh, I've seen your video, I've seen that." So, no, Sam, thank you so much. That has been incredible.
Thank you.